At my fiance's family reunion, her dad handed me the bill for the $18,000 catering. Welcome to the family, son. Pay up. Everyone laughed. I stood up, took the bill, and tore it into pieces. I already paid for something else. I'd bought the debt on his second mortgage. Payment is due on the 1st. Or I'm okay. Okay. I need to tell you what happened last Saturday because I've been floating 3 inches off the ground ever since. And my therapist is on vacation. And my cat refuses to make eye contact. And you're all I have right now. My name is Benedict. Yes, like the Pope. Yes, like the eggs. No, I don't find it funny anymore. I've been a flight attendant for 11 years, and you would not believe the number of people who ask me if I serve hollandaise. I do not. I serve tiny pretzels and existential dread at 37,000 feet. And last Saturday, at a family reunion on a rented lake house property in Connecticut, my future father-in-law handed me a bill for $18,247 in catering costs, winked at the crowd of 50-odd relatives watching with anticipation, and said, "Welcome to the family, son. Pay up." Everyone laughed. I stood up, took the invoice, looked at it for exactly 4 seconds, and tore it in half. Then tore it in half again. Then again, until it was confetti, which I placed gently back in the center of the table, like a garnish. Then I said, I already paid for something else. And I pulled out a different document entirely. But let's back up. You need context. You need character. You need to understand that this didn't happen in a vacuum. This happened after 14 months of being treated like a walking emergency fund with a pilot's uniform and good manners. And I want you to feel every single minute of it before we get to the part where I, a mild-mannered man who once cried at a layover in Helsinki because the airport bakery was closed, achieved what I can only describe as the cleanest checkmate I have ever witnessed, including against myself. TLDR is at the bottom, if you're in a hurry, but you shouldn't be. This is good. I met Celeste at gate B17 in Charlotte Douglas International Airport on a Tuesday in October 2 years ago. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to an outlet, eating a granola bar with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb, and I tripped over her carry-on and dropped an entire tray of complimentary beverage cups I was transporting back from the plane. She looked up, I looked down. There were plastic cups everywhere. She said, and I quote, "You know most people buy me a drink before they make an entrance like that." Reader. I gave her an upgrade to first class, my phone number, and approximately 3 weeks of my self-control. We dated long distance for 5 months. She was based in Raleigh. I was based everywhere and nowhere, as is the eternal curse of my profession. And then we decided to make it official. Moved her stuff into my apartment in phases. Got a dog named Pretzel. Yes, because of the job. Stop it. I love him. Started talking about the future in the kind of casual, terrifying way that means neither of you is running anymore. I proposed in March in a hotel room in Lisbon with a ring I'd saved for and a speech I'd practiced in the cockpit jump seat on a red-eye. And I'm not going to tell you what I said because it's private and I cried a little. And we don't need to workshop that here. She said yes, we were happy. And then we went to meet the family for the first time. Properly meet them, as in, we're engaged and here's the man in question. And something shifted in the atmosphere, like when the pressure changes before turbulence. I've spent 11 years noticing that feeling. I should have listened to it. Let me introduce the cast. I feel you need this. Richard Gallagher, Celeste's father, mid-60s. Retired entrepreneur, which I would later learn is a word that in this family means person who has started 11 businesses and finished 0 of them. He has the handshake of a man who learned about handshakes from a business. Motivational poster. He wore a polo shirt to every occasion, including the one time I met him for dinner and he presented it as just a casual thing, and it was at a restaurant with cloth napkins. He called me champ the first time we met, and has not called me by my actual name since. He laughed loudly at his own jokes and paused slightly after each one. Waiting. He was always waiting. Donna Gallagher, Celeste's mother. Soft-spoken in a way that should not be confused with gentle. She communicated primarily through loaded sighs, the strategic deployment of the phrase, "I just think," followed by a full minute of silence and a particular smile she reserved for moments when she wanted to express deep disapproval without technically saying anything that could be quoted back to her. She made incredible lasagna. This is her only redeeming quality, and I mean that as a compliment, because it was genuinely extraordinary lasagna. I will miss it. More on this later. Derek Gallagher, Celeste's older brother, 34 years old. Between jobs had been, as far as I could establish, since approximately 2019. Something in finance was his answer when I asked what he used to do. When I asked a follow-up question, his eyes went slightly unfocused in the way of a man accessing a story he has told many times, but no longer fully believes. He had a girlfriend named Madison who said literally so frequently it stopped meaning anything. I liked Madison. Madison escaped. We'll get to that. Uncle Phil, who nobody explained to me, he just appeared at family events, gave opinions about things no one had asked him about, and lived in the guest house on Richard's property, temporarily. A temporary arrangement that had apparently lasted 6 years. Uncle Phil's primary contribution to any conversation was to begin sentences with, "back when I was in sales," and then describe something that had no relationship to the current topic. He called me sport, which I found deeply offensive in a way I couldn't articulate. Grandma Vivian, who was 81, sharp as a tack, and pretended not to be. This was strategy, not decline. She had opinions about everything and expressed none of them directly. She worked entirely through observation, timing, and the judicious application of a particular look that I came to think of as the Vivienne. She gave it to me twice before the incident at the lake. I should have understood what it meant sooner. Here's what I didn't understand, and then slowly started to understand, and then completely understood by month 6 and kept ignoring because I was in love and optimistic and perhaps slightly stupid. Being practically family to the Gallaghers had a cost structure. It wasn't stated. It was never written down. Nobody handed me a welcome packet that said, "Congratulations on your relationship with Celeste. Here is your invoice for the next calendar year." It was just assumed. The way gravity is assumed. You don't notice it until you're already on the ground. Month 2, Richard mentioned casually, over Sunday dinner, that the back deck needed some work. I offered to help. I'm handy. I like projects. I own a very good drill. The work turned out to be a full deck rebuild, which took 4 weekends and cost me approximately $1,200 in materials, because Richard had already ordered some stuff that I ended up paying for at the hardware store. The deck looks great. Nobody thanked me specifically, but Richard told his neighbor I was a good worker, which I was apparently meant to receive as high praise. Month 4. Derek needed a small loan to cover rent while he waited for a deal to come through. The small loan was $900. The deal did not come through. The loan was not repaid. When I raised this gently with Celeste, she said, "That's just how Derek is," in the tone of someone who has been saying this their entire life and finds comfort in its unchanging truth. Month 5, Donna announced she was planning a little dinner for Richard's birthday. The little dinner grew. I'm not sure how. One day it was 12 people, then it was 30. Then it was 30 people with a catered menu. And I'm not sure at what point it became my financial responsibility. But I received a Venmo request for $340, your share of the birthday dinner supplies. And I paid it because it seemed easier. It was not easier. It was practice. Month 7. Phil borrowed my car for an hour and returned it 3 days later with a different smell and 2 of the hubcaps mysteriously scuffed. He said he'd take care of it. He has not taken care of it. Month 8. I paid for Celeste's cousin's bridesmaid alterations because the cousin was going through a thing, and Celeste looked at me with those eyes, and I said, "Fine. Here's my card. $180. Yes, I know what I'm doing." Month 9. Richard mentioned, also casually, that he was dealing with some cash flow issues related to one of his ventures, a subscription box for grilling accessories. I'm not going to editorialize here, and that the second property he owned, a rental house he'd bought in 2018, had a mortgage that was a little behind. He wasn't asking for anything specifically. He was simply sharing. In the way that a man shares information when he wants someone to offer to solve a problem. I nodded. I said nothing. I filed this information away. Yes, I know. I know what you're thinking. Keep reading. Month 10, 11, 12. The escalation. More dinners, more requests. A family vacation to the Outer Banks that I was invited to. Wonderful. And for which I was somehow, through a process I still cannot fully reconstruct, responsible for the beach house rental deposit of $2,100, which I paid, which was described afterward as so generous, by Donna, in a way that made clear it had not been generosity, but expectation. I am a flight attendant. I am not poor. The seniority has its benefits. The international routes pay well. I've been careful. But I am also not Richard Gallagher's personal endowment fund, a fact that did not seem to have been communicated to Richard Gallagher. Month 13. Celeste and I had our first real fight. I told her I felt like every family event came with a hidden price tag. She cried. I apologized. We talked. She said she didn't realize. She was used to it. She talked to her dad. She talked to her dad. Richard called me champ 3 times in the following week, which I'm choosing to interpret as an attempt at warmth. Nothing else changed. Month 14, the reunion announcement. The Gallagher family lake reunion, held annually at a rented property in Connecticut. Celeste's family from 3 states. 50 plus people. A long weekend. And it was mentioned gently, perhaps I'd like to help coordinate the catering. Since I was so good at logistics, I am a flight attendant, yes, fine. This is technically adjacent to logistics. And I knew how to handle vendors. I said, sure, I'll coordinate. I am a helpful person. I am a man who rewires entire decks and pays for bridesmaid alterations and makes sure Derek has a roof over his head, even though Derek has never once asked how I'm doing. I coordinated the catering. And while I was coordinating things, I made one additional phone call that nobody asked me to make. I'll keep this brief because honestly, the legal financial details are less interesting than the moment of impact. But you need the shape of it. Richard's second mortgage, the one on the rental property he'd mentioned in month 9, had gone through a servicer. The servicer had sold the debt. The new holder was a small private investment firm. One of my college friends, a man named Greg, who I've described to you in no other way than this. Greg once legally changed his middle name to Maximilian for a bet and never changed it back. Greg works in debt acquisition. I called Greg from a Dallas hotel room, explained the situation, asked if the note was still available for purchase. It was. The price was not small. I will not tell you exactly what I paid because my mother reads Reddit. Hi, Mom. Yes, I'm fine. No, you cannot call the Gallaghers. But I will tell you it was an amount that hurt slightly, an amount I'd been saving toward a house down payment, an amount that felt, in the moment, like either the smartest or most unhinged decision I'd ever made. I wired the money. Greg sent me a very professional email with attachments. I printed the attachments. I put them in a manila envelope. I flew to Connecticut. The lake house was beautiful. I'll give Richard that. He had taste in rentals. 53 family members over 3 days. Children running. Someone was always on the dock. Donna made 3 different kinds of potato salad, and they were all good. I will miss the potato salad. I mean it. This is real grief. I was friendly. I was warm. I shook hands. I played cornhole with Derek and lost on purpose because winning felt mean, and I was saving my energy. I had the envelope in my bag. I had been thinking about this moment for 6 weeks. I felt like a man waiting for a flight that is definitely going to board. Just not yet. Saturday evening. Dinner outside. The catering company I'd arranged had done a magnificent job. There were past appetizers, a whole roasted situation with the meat, a dessert table that made one of the children actually gasp. It was lovely. 53 people eating, talking, the sun going gold over the lake. Genuinely beautiful. Richard stood up at the head of the long table. He clinked his glass. He made a toast. Warm, confident, practiced. The toast of a man who has been the center of his own family's attention for several decades and sees no reason to stop. He talked about legacy. He talked about family. He talked about how he was happy to see everyone together. Then he looked at me. He reached into his jacket pocket. He had it in his jacket pocket. He'd been holding it the whole time, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly. He held it out across the table toward me. It was the catering invoice, $18,247, full itemized. My company, my vendor, my coordination. He said, with the smile of a man who had workshopped this for at least 2 weeks. Welcome to the family, son. Pay up. The table laughed. Not everyone. I want to be fair here. Not everyone laughed. And I caught Vivian's face in that moment, and she was not laughing. She was doing something much more interesting with her expression, which I will describe as knowing. But enough people laughed that it landed, that it had the shape of a joke and the weight of something else. I want to tell you, I was calm because I'd planned this. I was calm. I stood up slowly in the way that I have learned. After 11 years of de-escalating situations at 37,000 feet with people who are scared and drunk and sometimes both, to stand up when a situation requires steadiness. I took the invoice. I looked at it for approximately 4 seconds, long enough to let the laughter fade, long enough for people to start to feel the first edge of uncertainty about whether this had been a good joke. And I tore it in half. Then in half again. Then again. I placed the pieces in the center of the table, into the silence, and it had gone very quiet. The way it goes quiet when everyone at a table realizes simultaneously that the energy has changed. I reached into the bag under my chair and removed the manila envelope. I said, I already paid for something else. I opened the envelope. I removed the documents, nicely printed. Greg's firm is very professional, very clean letterhead, and I slid them across the table to Richard. He looked down. I said, I purchased the debt on your second mortgage, the rental property on Elmwood. The note was acquired 6 weeks ago. A beat. Payment is due on the 1st of the month, or we begin foreclosure proceedings. I sat down. I picked up my fork. I ate a piece of roasted potato, which was very good. The catering company had done excellent work with the seasoning. I made a note to leave them a 5-star review. 0:00, Richard reads the documents. He reads them again. He puts them down. He picks them up. 0:47, Derek leans over to read the documents. Derek's expression suggests that he does not fully understand the documents. Madison, sitting next to Derek, reads the documents and understands them immediately. She looks at me. I give her a small nod. 1:30, Donna says, very quietly, Richard. It contains entire novels. 2:00, Uncle Phil begins a sentence with, back when I was in sales, and is shushed by 3 separate people simultaneously. 3:15, Richard finds his voice. It's not his good voice. It's a higher voice, a slightly strained voice, a voice that has misplaced its confidence and is looking for it. He says, this isn't, you can't just champ. What is this? I said, it's a mortgage note, Richard. It's very standard. Greg's firm does this regularly. But why? Well, I set my fork down. You handed me a catering bill for $18,247 in front of your entire family and asked me to pay up. I thought we were talking about money, so I thought I'd bring up the money we should actually be talking about. 4:00, someone at the far end of the table starts crying. I genuinely couldn't see who. It might have been about the situation. It might have been about the dessert table, which was quite moving. 5:30, Richard says the word humiliated. Specifically, you've humiliated this family. I want to note, for the record, that I was eating potato when he said this, very calmly, with a cloth napkin on my lap. If anyone in this scene looked humiliated, it was not the man with the napkin on his lap. I said, Richard, you owe $73,400 on that property. The payments are 3 months behind. I'm not here to embarrass you. I bought that note because I thought, worst case, we resolve this between family. Best case, I have some security. Either way, it seemed like good logistics. He called me good at logistics. I thought that was a nice touch. 6:45, Donna says something to Richard in a rapid, low voice that I cannot fully hear, but that contains the phrases, what did you think would happen? And I told you about the reunion thing, and he's a flight attendant, Richard. They deal with emergencies for a living. This is the most Donna has ever liked me, and I appreciate it. 8 o'clock, Derek, who has been very quiet, says, "Wait, so he owns part of the house?" Madison says very clearly, "He owns the debt, Derek. What's the difference?" "A lot. I'll explain later." She texted me the next week that the explanation had taken 45 minutes and had not fully landed. 9 o'clock. Grandma Vivian, who has been silent this entire time, eating her dinner with great serenity, says without looking up from her plate, "I always did say that boy had good sense." She has said exactly 2 things to me in 14 months. Both of them, in retrospect, were this: different words, same content. 10:30, Uncle Phil makes a second attempt at back when I was in sales. And this time, nobody even bothers to shush him. He finishes the sentence. Nobody responds. He eats his salad. 12 o'clock, Richard looks at me and says in a quieter voice, stripped of the performance, "Just a man now. What do you want, Benedict?" First time in 14 months, he's used my actual name. I said, "Honestly, I want us to talk like adults. I want to work out a real payment plan. I want to go to dinner with you and not wonder what the bill is going to cost me. And I want you to understand that I'm not your champ or your sport or your son until I actually am, which means a real conversation about what this family expects from me and what I can actually offer." I picked my fork back up, but first I'd like to finish this potato because the catering company did a genuinely exceptional job and it would be a shame to waste it. 14 o'clock. Celeste, who has been sitting beside me this entire time, very still, takes my hand under the table. She squeezes once. I squeeze back. I'm going to be honest. I didn't know exactly how this was going to go. I had the plan. I had the documents. I had rehearsed my lines on a read-eye to Heathrow, which is either very methodical or deeply strange, possibly both. What I didn't have was certainty about Celeste. We'd talked before the reunion. I mean, not about the mortgage specifically, because I hadn't told her about that, which was either romantic or calculating, depending on your perspective. Discuss in comments. We'd talked about the patterns, the money, the expectations. She'd cried. I'd been very careful, very honest. I said, "I love you. I want to marry you. And I can't do that if becoming part of your family means becoming part of the infrastructure." She sat with that for a long time. She said, "I think my dad has always gotten away with things because nobody ever pushed back." I said, "I noticed." She said, "If you push back, I know. It's going to be chaos." I know. She was quiet. Then, "Make sure it's worth it." That night at the lake, walking back to our room, after the dinner had continued in the confused, muted way of an event that has lost its narrative. The catering was still good. The sun finished setting. Derek ate 3 pieces of cake while looking profoundly lost. Celeste said, "I didn't know about the mortgage thing." "I know. You bought my father's debt." "Yes. That's either the most insane thing anyone has done for me, or the most insane thing anyone has done, period. I'm open to either interpretation." She laughed. She actually laughed, a real one. The one I know. The one from gate B17 with the granola bar. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "He's going to want to negotiate." "I'll be fair," I said. "I just want fair back." 2 weeks later, I sat down with Richard and a lawyer, his, and a lawyer, mine, a friend. She charged me a very reasonable rate and sent me a fruit basket afterward, which I'm still thinking about. We restructured the note. He's making payments. They're real payments, documented on a real schedule. He called me Benedict twice in that meeting. I'm choosing to see this as a breakthrough. Derek called me the week after the reunion. I expected hostility. Instead, he said, "Hey, what happened at the reunion? Was that a long time coming?" I said, "Pretty long." "Yeah." Silence. Then, "I've been thinking about how I'm kind of in the same position with my dad. Like, he's always, I've been waiting for this deal to, a long pause. Is Madison right that I should get a financial advisor?" "Derek," I said, "Madison is right about most things." He took a breath. Why didn't anyone tell me this was an option? Like, to just change things. I didn't have a good answer for that one. Sometimes you're in the middle of something for so long, you forget it's something you could leave. He's been in finance, again, since August. Real finance this time. He showed me a spreadsheet last month. It was genuinely good. I told him so. He looked like a man receiving water in a desert, which was a lot, but I understood it. Donna sent me her lasagna recipe 3 weeks after the reunion. Just the recipe, no context, in an email with the subject line, "Thought you might like this." I have made it twice. It is extraordinary. I have not acknowledged that it is an olive branch specifically, but I have also not acknowledged it. We exist in a mutual agreement of polite warmth. It's genuinely fine. It might get better. Uncle Phil told someone at a subsequent family dinner that I was a real operator, which I understand, from Phil, is the highest possible praise. I accept it. And Grandma Vivian, 81 years old, sharp as a tack, pretending not to be, sent me a handwritten note on actual note paper with a floral border. It said, "Good boy. Don't let them forget it." I have it framed in my office. I mean that literally. It is in a small frame on my desk. Pretzel the dog has sniffed it and approved. I want to tell you something small, because the big things are dramatic and the small things are what actually change your life. The Monday after the reunion, I woke up before Celeste, put on coffee, poured myself a cup, and sat at my kitchen table. Nobody asked me for anything. Nobody texted about a payment or a favor or a logistical emergency or a deck that needed rebuilding. Pretzel sat at my feet and made the small contented noises of a dog who is perfectly happy. The coffee was very good. I'd gotten a new bag of beans from a place in Raleigh that Celeste likes, and I'd ground them fresh. And in the morning light in my kitchen, it tasted like something I had earned. I sat there for 45 minutes and did absolutely nothing. It was genuinely one of the best 45 minutes of the past 14 months. I've been thinking about why the whole thing worked. Not the mortgage, I mean the general stance. The decision to stop absorbing the family's financial atmosphere and start having a position of my own. And I think it's this. I was so afraid of disrupting something fragile that I kept treating the relationship like it was made of glass. But it wasn't. It was made of the same thing most things are made of: habits and assumptions, and the implicit agreement that what's working for everyone else is working for everyone. It wasn't working for me. Once I said that, clearly, not with shouting, not with dramatics, just with a manila envelope and a quietly eaten potato, the whole thing reoriented. Not perfectly, not instantly, but it reoriented. Celeste and I are still planning the wedding. It's going to be smaller than her parents originally wanted. We are paying for it ourselves, evenly, from a joint account we opened in September. Richard made a comment at one point about a contribution, and I said, "That's very kind, we'll let you know if we need anything," in a voice that closed the topic like a file drawer, and he nodded. And that was the end of it. We're looking at a venue in the spring. I'm going to serve tiny pretzels at the cocktail hour. Celeste thinks this is hilarious. It is hilarious. 11 years of flying has taught me one thing more than anything else. Turbulence doesn't mean the plane is going down. It means the conditions changed, and now you're moving through them. The worst thing you can do in turbulence is overcorrect. The best thing you can do is hold your line, communicate clearly, and trust that the structure is sound. The structure is sound. I'm not a champ or a sport or a practically family adjunct walking emergency fund. I'm Benedict. I'm a flight attendant. I have a very good drill and a dog named Pretzel and a fiancée who squeezes my hand once when she's proud of me and who is currently asleep in the next room while I type this on my laptop at midnight. Because apparently this is how I process things now. I paid for something, yes, more than one thing, if we're counting. But I also collected something. The specific, quiet dignity of a man who finally knows what he's worth and has the paperwork to prove it. So, AITA, I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks. I don't think so, but I'm biased. I'm the guy who tore up the invoice. Let me know in the comments. I'll be the one not paying for anything I didn't agree to.